I want you to really explain what an ADU is.
The simplest way I could explain what an ADU is to explain why an ADU exists. California is in a housing crisis, but California couldn't force local municipalities to rezone some of the existing land that they have to make a single family plot of land now into a multi-family. This is like a great hack, actually. The state specifically states that if you're doing a conversion ADU from non-habitable space, regardless of its size, you're allowed to convert that into an ADU.
But you have to leave the exact structure and just redo it?
Correct.
How long can somebody expect it to take from start to finish?
In life, there's a blueprint for everything. There's no need to start over. Hear from industry leaders, those at the top of their fitness journey, and real estate gurus. They tell you exactly how they did it. All you have to do is listen, learn, and execute. This is The Blueprint with Brad Rice.
All right, guys, we're back. Another edition of The Blueprint, and I got to tell you, this one I think you're really going to enjoy because I'm talking to somebody who's got expertise in an area that is hot right now. ADUs, or Accessory Dwelling Units. I've got with me today France Hanna. He's an ADU expert and a consultant. He owns a company called ADU Wonders, and he's been doing this for years. He's got lots of experience, lots of knowledge in this area. He knows all the laws and the ways to navigate to get an ADU on your property, whether it's an owner-occupied or an investment property. Basically, he's an all-in-one. He'll take you from very beginning, thinking about it, structuring it, designing it, all the way through the permits, all the way over the finish line. He's my advisor, and he's helping me on a couple of units right now. So that's how I know he's really good. And you're going to learn from him. You're going to learn a lot today. So, all right, France, welcome, man.
Thank you. Honor to be here.
Yeah, thanks for taking the drive up from San Diego.
My pleasure.
Let's start with, I want you to really, as the expert, explain what an ADU is.
Yeah, so the simplest way I could explain what an ADU is to explain why an ADU exists. And then I think that will explain it naturally. So an ADU was basically created, which stands for Accessory Dwelling Unit, because California is in a housing crisis and California needed to add more homes, but California couldn't force local municipalities to rezone some of the existing land that they have to make a single family plot of land now into a multi-family. And, you know, there's so much bureaucracy for something like that, and you leave it up to cities, and certain cities are, you know, more anti-housing, some are not, etc. So the state just decided to take kind of existing legislation within like granny flats and stuff, like, you know, you could build like a little granny flat in the back of let's expand on that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're not now saying a single family resident can build another home on the property because that would violate the existing zoning laws. We're saying you can build an accessory home on the property, and then you have to define what an accessory home is, because if there's no definition to it, then it's just another home. Mm-hmm. So then, you know, you put some parameters in place and you say like, okay, the unit can't be more than 1,200 square feet, can't be less than this thing, you know, and then you kind of set the definition, and then you just created this new thing called an accessory dwelling unit, and it bypasses the need for a homeowner, like you said, or an investor to seek rezoning their lot to, you know, build more housing.
Got it. So when did the term ADU come about and get defined?
I believe it was 2019 to 2020. So
So previous to that, that terminology ADU didn't exist.
that terminology was just defined as like a tiny home or a granny flat on the property.
Is a granny flat like a real term, or is that
A granny
slang
flat
term?
was a real term.
So what's
yeah.
the difference between a granny flat and an ADU?
Yeah, the granny flat was much more restricted. A granny flat, I could be mistaken, but the granny flat, you didn't really get like a separate address. It was more like you're building additional habitable space. You couldn't make it, as big as you wanted to. The local municipalities could still deny it. It was basically like, you trying to build something a little small, and you're at the mercy of your local council to see if they'd even allow it. So it's really like it was almost nothing. Like a typical granny flat is only like 200 to like 300 square
100
feet.
square feet.
Yeah.
So is it fair to say that a granny flat was really like a mother-in-law quarters, but separate entrance, and something where you could just add a few hundred square feet, which gives you a bedroom, maybe a small kitchenette, and a little bit of a seating area for, kind of a den area, and then that's it. Like, that's your granny flat. No separate address, no separate entrance, other than to the unit itself. So that makes a lot of sense. So ADUs opened the door to having more habitable space in California, where there's a housing shortage, which is driving rent way up, right? Mm-hmm. And so California said, let's put these guidelines in place that will enable homeowners and or single family investors to add housing to this crisis, right? And has it worked?
Yeah, here's what I'll add to that, because ADUs definitely are making an impact. I wouldn't conflate ADU legislation as the solution to this housing crisis, because it's such a complicated, problem.
It's compounded. Like it really is a crisis. And now we're adding another, 13,000 displaced people from homes in the Pacific Palisades and Malibu from the recent fires. And so it's going to be even more compounded. All right, well, cool. So that really helps, just describing what an ADU is, because most people don't know what that is. What does your service do for somebody who would like to investigate an ADU?
Yeah, so the ADU on a state level, basically the state says, hey, almost everyone is allowed to build an ADU now on their property. And then they give some broad, definitions of what local municipalities, can do, cannot do, etc. And then they leave the rest up to the local municipality, like, hey, you have to allow this person to build an ADU. And then you can set your own rules to it, okay? And so depending on the municipality, they may be super pro housing, and therefore they have like really, really kind of lax regulations when it comes to building an ADU. And then you have your other municipalities, and that in itself is complicated, right? Because it's like you have a plethora of options, which one is the best one? And then you have certain municipalities who are maybe anti like development, infill development like this. Right. And they make it really strict for you to like, hey, you can still get an ADU, but you have to jump through all these hurdles. So where we come in as a consultant to a specific client, and obviously, as you mentioned, we're very fortunate to have you as a client. And so we come in and we basically act as the expert and the consultant for our client, and helping first navigate the plethora of different challenges that come with building an ADU on the specific property. But we also help guide our clients into determining what their goal is, and helping achieve that goal, and help them define that goal. Yeah. What are we building this unit for? What does your budget look like? What does the timeline look like? What's more important to you, etc. And then we really understand the design and permitting process like no one else. So we freaking take, whatever it is that we've set our minds to do, to accomplish in building that ADU, and we just go to bat and we go to this.
You freaking do. You really do. And we'll get into in just a moment here how you do that. But I want to just kind of redefine what you said. So your service really takes from concept of somebody saying, I want to see about building an ADU on my property, whether it's the property they live in or an investment property. So you help them navigate what they can and cannot do.
Correct.
Then you also, so you're consulting them with them for that. Then you also create the design.
Correct.
You do the blueprints per se. So you do the actual drawings and the engineering.
Correct.
And then the next step is you get the permits.
Correct.
And that's challenging. We'll talk about that because that's where where your knowledge really comes in is during that phase, like really comes in. And then you actually will take them all the way through the cost of construction, give them referrals for contractors that do this, and then ensure that the things that you outlined and that you got permits for, that they actually adhere to that when you're out for inspections and things of that nature. So you don't just stop at giving them the design and giving them, the plans. You actually will make sure that they're able to complete that job that you helped them to design. So literally full service. And again, guys, I know this because France has helped me. We're almost done with our first together, and we've already started our second. And man, there are some challenges. So I think it'd be good right there to kind of take that opportunity and talk about who regulates or governs ADUs in California.
Basically, the HCD is which is the Housing Commission and Development. And so the HCD basically is the end-all, be-all when it comes to any ADU regulation. And so if a local municipality is not in compliance per se, or there's some technical things that need to be more defined, the HCD is the people that you go to.
They're the authority.
100%.
Okay. So you don't necessarily have to start by going through the HDC, but you use their definitions and guidelines to help guide you through the new municipalities that are regulating this in the various cities. And you had to, I know with our project, basically report the city numerous times for different violations that they were trying to force us to do that fell under the HCD guidelines that said you can't do that. And so let's talk about that for a minute, because I think there's probably a lot of people that think, well, I could do this myself. I'll just read the guidelines of the HCD. I'll hire my own architect and I'll do this and that. Why do I need to pay a consultant to help me? Which, by the way, it's not that costly, so it's worth it. But let's talk a little bit about those challenges and then we'll talk about other challenges. But the challenges with getting the permits from the various cities, and what you have to do to overcome those challenges.
Yeah, it really, it's very, like each municipality has its own set of challenges. A lot of times, like I said, if your local city municipality, whatever you want to call it, is super pro housing, then with it comes a bunch of like different options. So like, for example, I'm from San Diego. Our, current mayor is very pro development. So San Diego has this bonus ADU program where in certain circumstances you can build almost an unlimited amount of ADUs on the property. Yeah.
That's interesting.
But it may not be the best solution for you, right? So
are you saying that you could have more than 4? Like residential zoning is considered 1 to 4 family.
Yeah.
When you get into 5 units or more, it's commercial. It's usually completely different zoning. Of course, it's different financing as well on the mortgage side.
Yeah.
So are you saying there are properties or projects you've worked on that have more than 4 units and they're just considered ADUs?
Yes, and there are new laws that just went into effect for 2025 where California basically says that any property that's, 10 or under units, they're making the process more streamlined to get development, and they specifically define that ADUs actually don't count towards those 10. So yeah. So
That's
I
really interesting. So obviously knowing at a local level what the guidelines are is super important. You, I know, service kind of all of Southern California. Yeah, I'm in Ventura County, and you're doing a great job with me here. I'm guessing you probably don't go much north of us, like Santa Barbara County.
Yeah, we can expand there.
Okay.
It's case by case basis at the moment.
Okay, got it. So anyway, going back to kind of the challenges, and you use a specific, you can use mine,
Yeah.
you use another one. Give us an example of the ADU process and where you've hit those challenges either during the permitting process or post that, and what you've had to do to overcome that with the HCD.
Yeah, so basically with every single project that, or potential project that comes across our desk, the first thing I do is if I haven't worked already with that specific municipality, is I go and spend an ample amount of time reading their municipal code. Because I know if I was running that city, how the municipal code should read. And then based upon me reading their municipal code, I understand okay, I get a sense of, okay, this is where on, which side of the fence that this municipality is going to probably fall under, because they're making it really, really challenging to get an ADU, or it's oh, this municipality is seems hey,
easier.
yeah, let's go ahead and get ADUs,
So would you call that your feasibility study?
Yes.
Okay. And if I remember correctly, that feasibility study is only about $1,000, right?
Correct.
And well worth it. Even if you don't take the next step as a homeowner, you'll know exactly what kind of challenges you'll have and if it's worth taking the next steps by going through that feasibility study. Frankly, even if somebody, just wanted to read it themselves, they're not going to understand at the level you will, or what challenges there would be, or ways to overcome those challenges, knowing what you know about the HCD, right? And so, okay, so you're in the feasibility study. You kind of recognize whether a city is going to be easy or difficult to work with, but you know what they should be doing. So even if they're difficult, if you look at it and you go, this may be difficult, you know what obstacles you can overcome. So let's talk
Absolutely.
very specifically about that. You have what kind of obstacles? Give us an example of an obstacle during that initial kind of design fit or permitting phase that you could have a challenge with that you may have to go over somebody's head. Are you a tech investor looking to shape the future of real estate? HomePie is the #1 for sale by owner marketplace, and we are revolutionizing the way homes are bought and sold. I'd love to hear from you. Just email invest@homepie.com and let's chat. Now back to the show.
Yeah, a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, the challenges really stem from the local municipalities not interpreting the ADU law properly. And that was the challenge that we ran with our first project for you with Cole Avenue, was, hey, Ventura County is you're only allowed one ADU, and we had some, non-habitable / kind of habitable space situation. Yep. And then I'm no, I understand what the ADU law is, and, you're non-conforming to the ADU law. So that pops up in some shape or form, 9 out of 10 projects. Yours was one, and we've done multiple versions of your challenge, which is a single family home can potentially actually have 3 ADUs if it's owner occupied, a conversion ADU, a detached ADU, and a junior ADU. So with yours, it wasn't owner occupied, but I knew 100% we're going to get 2 ADUs on the property, even though Ventura County said, no, single-family homes only entitled to 1 ADU. Whether you decide whether it's conversion, detached, you get one. And, we went to Ventura County, and I said, hey, you guys aren't interpreting the law properly. Can you forward this to a supervisor? And I remember their response was actually like, hey, they're going to have a meeting about this. And if you remember, in about 3 months, actually, to revisit this topic. I'm like, okay, that's nice. But
they were going to delay us 90 days just during that process. So, okay, 3 types.
Yeah.
You mentioned a conversion.
Correct.
A detached.
Mm-hmm.
And an
attached. Correct.
Tell us the difference.
So conversion ADU can be, the best ones are you can convert habitable or non-habitable space. If you're converting habitable space, it's a little bit more restrictive in terms of if you have a 1,000 square foot home, the city might say, hey, you can only convert 30% of that existing home, et cetera. Some cities say, well, you can go 50-50, et cetera. And then if you have this is a great hack, actually, because, ADUs typically have a size limit of 1,200 square feet. So I've done this hack on several different instances. The state specifically states that if you're doing a conversion ADU from non-habitable space, and the space that you're converting, regardless of its size, you're allowed to convert that into an ADU. And they literally use an example, if you have a 3,000 square foot barn, and you want to convert that into an ADU, you can build a 3,000 square foot ADU, and no one can say anything about it.
That is amazing. But you have to leave the exact structure and just redo it?
Correct.
So if it's a barn, you might have to do some insulation, some drywall, maybe even reside it or whatever.
Sure.
But as long as the general structure is there, you're not tearing it down and rebuilding it, you're okay?
They'll typically, they're pretty lenient about that.
Okay.
Hey, if the material is non-conforming with what I'm trying to build, if the material that I was using for the barn is not conducive to our build, they're not going to care as long as the footprint itself doesn't change.
Man, I got to tell you, if I knew that, if it existed before 2019, I had a property that would have been perfect for stuff like that. But, okay, I want to circle back to something. So let me make a note here because I want to talk about sewer connection and things of that nature. But, okay, so you've got your conversion, and that's habitable or non-habitable conversions. Mm-hmm. And it's actually more restrictive if it's already habitable.
Mm-hmm.
If it's non-habitable, which in my case, I had a non-habitable conversion, detached.
Mm-hmm.
It was an art studio.
Mm-hmm.
It was and it was perfect. It had a little kitchenette and all these things. And so we did a conversion of that. That was what they were trying to say is, nope, you've got yours. That's it. You can't have another one. And you're like, no. That's not going to work. Here are the laws, right?
Yeah.
And basically it just took days of you kind of pushing buttons with the right people for them to concede that you were right. But I wouldn't have known that, and probably your average person trying to do it on their own wouldn't have known that. So again, that's where a consultant really helps. So you've got your conversion. Now you've got your detached. What's that?
So your detached ADU is that's the most popular route that people choose to go with. And so you have your ADU. The state says, with every property and every municipality, et cetera, you'll have one of 2 things. Your local municipality is going to impose a lot coverage, which is, just as the name suggests, how much of the lot can be covered by structures. Okay. And so they'll say it's 50% lot coverage. You have a 10,000 square foot lot, so you can have 5,000 square feet of structures.
Footprint.
Yeah,
Yep.
Correct. So, and then a lot of other municipalities will use the more popular one is called floor area ratio, which is almost like lot coverage, kind of the same principles. But floor area ratio is you go up, you go, et cetera. This is your buildable, square footage. So That's really important because in the first step, when we're doing, the discovery with the client, we're doing the feasibility of the actual project, we figure out what our lot coverage is or our floor area ratio, and we say, hey, we have, for example, only 500 square feet remaining of floor area ratio or lot coverage, etc. So if we're going to build a conversion ADU, since you're converting existing space, it doesn't take a single square foot from that. And so building a detached unit, which is popular for a lot of different reasons, it's going to take away from that. Now, when you're doing a detached ADU, the state specifically states that if your ADU just meets the 4-foot setback from your, rear and side, etc.,
The lot lines.
the lot line, correct. You're allowed at least an 800 square foot ADU. Okay. And so actually, that's what we also did for Cole Avenue, was before they could even start imposing other additional junk on us for that project, I said, hey, not only am I allowed 2 ADUs, I'm going to exercise my state by right ADU of 800 square feet. So you can't say anything to us. You can't impose some crazy rules. Like, it has to look I'm entitled to this.
So literally what France did is, when he was going through this process, is he emailed them and told them the way it was going to go down. I was BCC'd on these things, and so I saw. But he literally said, hey, not only are we allowed to do what I'm doing, we're going to have this other ADU. We're going to convert the existing art studio to an ADU, but just know this is going to be 800 square feet, and we're allowed to do this. So don't even try it.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
essentially what you did. So, okay, cool. Then we have a detached.
Yeah, so that was the detached. Yeah, correct. So the detached are really popular because...
I'm sorry, I was going to say then we have an attached. We talked about detached. What's attached?
So attached, they're a bit more. They come handy for clients who just don't have a lot of backyard space. Let's say they want to build an ADU, and then if there's setbacks between the setbacks and the building separation, you're gonna be correct. So then it's like, okay, I'm gonna do an attached. Now the detached options are popular because you can go up to 1,200 square feet, and like 99% of cases on an ADU. Some municipalities can limit that. The state only says 800, etc. So an attached does become a little bit more restrictive in the sense that you're not allowed an 800 square foot attached ADU. You're allowed an 800 square foot by right ADU that has to be detached.
Okay.
And that's because the attached ADUs, this local municipalities can impose a lot of restrictions on them, including size. Like, hey, this cannot exceed like 40% of the house size, etc.
So it's more restrictive to have it attached. And when we say attached, we're talking about sharing a wall.
Correct.
Things of that nature. For me, obviously, architecturally, that makes it more difficult because you want to match the existing architecture. You're a little restricted there, and ceiling heights and all the other things. What about garage conversions? Is that considered attached? Or you said something that you called a junior ADU?
Yeah. So junior ADU, we've done a few. Junior ADUs are just like kind of the quickest way to get an ADU permit.
Okay.
They play a role. They can't be more than 500 square feet. It has to be owner occupied. It can share like, a bathroom with the main unit. Actually, it can. So ADUs are separate living spaces, but a junior ADU is kind of ties into the main home.
So like a garage
conversion, yeah.
Or maybe you have a bonus room.
Sure,
Or
yeah.
maybe it's an upstairs you've got kind of a game room and that's all that's there.
Yeah.
So you'll share a bathroom and a kitchen, but it'll be a legal separate unit, which, let's make sure that people understand this. If you're going to take a house and you're going to divide it up and rent it to more than one person, even if you could do it today without permitting and things of that nature, you're leaving yourself culpable to a lawsuit, to things that could happen because it's not legally that. And so if your tenants find out it's not legally allowed to be occupied as a multi-unit, you could be in trouble, and your insurance may not even cover you if something happens. So if you're thinking about doing that, dividing an upstairs from a downstairs, even if it's going to be shared bathroom, shared kitchen, whatever it is, with this junior ADU, you want to get it permitted, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
They can share, they can have obviously access to the main home, like we said. It still needs its own independent access to the exterior, to the outside.
A stairway up to the upstairs. Or
Yeah,
whatever
and just a simple kitchenette, which like there's like a Home Depot setup, like the size of half of that desk probably.
Yeah.
That you'd have to throw in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, the junior ADU route, I've seen because let's say you have so traditionally for the clients that we've served, let's say you have an existing home, and the HOA, and you're in an HOA community, et cetera, and the HOA says like, oh, these homes have to be this way. And yeah, you can't go over your lot coverage. You're already maxed out on your 2,000 square foot home. But let's say you're like, I'm going to move my, mother-in-law in, and I just need like an extra room.
Yeah.
And they say, no, it's not possible. You can't grow your existing home by an extra room. So then we say, no, you can. Let's just call it a junior ADU. They cannot say no to a junior ADU. You're already living on the property. We'll make it
so it
like
doesn't even matter the
fancy room.
CC&Rs of an HOA. You can. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Guys, make a mental note of that, because a lot of us in California are in PUDs, planned unit developments, that do have HOAs, and they are very restrictive, the CC&Rs. But you're telling us the HDC trumps that and their guidelines. So if you wanted to add a bedroom, you could do that.
Yeah, it's just
Okay.
junior ADU.
That's it. You just call it a
junior ADU.
All right.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that people understand the difference between this, the significance of a 500 square foot ADU, an 800 square foot ADU, and up to a 1,200 square foot.
Yeah.
My advice for someone selling their home: number 1, do it yourself and save. Number 2, use HomePie.
HomePie makes it easy to buy or sell without an agent. I can list a home in minutes and start receiving offers right away from buyers.
When we discovered that we didn't have to lose $40,000 in agent commission just to upsize to a larger home, it was an obvious choice.
List your home for free at homepie.com. Keep your piece of the pie.
So, I've seen like a 2-bedroom, 1,200 square foot ADU. And then I've seen like a 4-bedroom, 1,200 square foot ADU. So it's really like a case by case in terms of when we're doing that discovery, sit down with our clients and then the local municipalities. And then we also just do a survey of like, okay, if this particular client, their goal is to rent a unit, create, additional like rentable space in that area. So we survey the local rent market. Mm-hmm. We see what's renting, what are people looking for, et cetera. Like, do we need more bedrooms? Do people just want bigger space, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one component of it, and making a determination of how big this ADU should be. So typically and then, you've seen it with your own projects, which is we also try to strategize kind of our approach with each specific municipality, because, we did one in Ventura County, now we're doing one in Simi Valley. So that we have like 2 different municipalities, and it's like, oh, the impact fees in Simi Valley, they're like really high. Yeah. And you've seen their ADU ordinances. They're very kind of like restrictive compared to like, other places. So, for example, with that one, we could have also exercised our 800 square foot ADU, and, you can't tell us anything. It's like up to 800 square foot ADU. And then, above 750 square feet is when the city can start imposing like, impact fees, park fees, etc. And Simi Valley was gonna really get us with that. And that's like a kind of a hack is like that we exercise with a lot of our clients. Like, hey, well, let's just make this unit like 749 square feet.
Which we're doing with one of mine now.
Yeah.
So let me just reiterate. If you're going to do up to 12 or over, let's call it over 800 up to 1200, you're going to find more restrictions there. It's not you're going to have to kind of navigate through those restrictions. You don't have a blanket right to build it.
Yeah.
Right?
You have a blanket right for up to 800.
Okay. So if you keep it up to 800, then you could kind of force that situation, call in the HDC and say, here are the guidelines, we're doing this.
Yeah.
However, the difference between 750 and 800 may be a cost difference, and that extra 50 square feet may not really make sense to do, so you help to navigate that part of it. And then there's a separate level, and that's 500. Isn't there a significance to kind of the other guidelines that make it even easier at 500?
100%. So up to 500, basically you're exempt from all fees, including school fees. So we've done a lot of units like at 499 square feet because, what's the extra square foot going to do for us?
So that's really important to think about, because if you're considering doing, let's say, a 750 square foot ADU to avoid some of the fees that are for above that, and you look at the feasibility study that you do with the rent surveys, and there's not much of a difference between 500 square feet return for what you could rent it for and 750, you might be better off at 500 and save yourself maybe $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 in fees. And obviously it's going to be less money to build that unit to begin with because it's smaller, but that's what you help them navigate.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Awesome. That's really good. That's super insightful for people. What about sewer connection? Do these detached ADUs need to have a sewer connection? Do they need to have their own water service? Do they need to have their own electrical service? What gas? Talk to us about the other requirements. You already mentioned that if it's detached, you can have a separate address. That's a big benefit for renters, not sharing a mailbox.
Yeah.
But what about all the utilities?
Yeah, so utilities, it's still a case-by-case basis, but majority of cases, the local, utility providers, they will not allow the unit itself to have its own independent, like, main, line for sewer, water, electrical. They'll want you to kind of piggyback off the existing infrastructure. And this is actually really, really important. If you go hire just a regular designer to do your designs for you, then you hire a permit runner to do the permit coordination, then you hire a structural engineer. You need someone to look beyond that and really kind of, there's this like value engineering component that comes in.
Yeah.
And I keep referring back to
for
your
sure,
project.
as you should.
Because your project, we actually you got to see it firsthand,
Yep.
like some of the challenges, and one of them was necessitating a water line upgrade.
Yep.
And so that's very, very important because yours wasn't that big of an expense compared to some of these other municipalities. It's like a $30,000 to $50,000 expense, believe it or not, to upgrade the existing infrastructure to now service the main home as well as the ADU. And it's all because the person wasn't even in their brain to think about prior to going ahead with the permit and realizing like, hey, I'm building way too big of a unit. I'm being pushed over this limit. So same thing with electrical panels, like needing an electrical panel upgrade, sewer lines. So I think part of the bigger play with ADUs in my personal opinion. The goal ever since ADUs, I think, were started, and the legislation has continued to evolve, and it's already actually been passed, which is to allow ADUs to be completely independent from the main house. Now, if they would have came out the back at the gate and said, "Hey, not only are we gonna circumvent the existing zoning laws by building another house, and in some cases, like the ADU is bigger than the main home." Right? So you're building another house on a property that's only zoned for single family residence. If they would have came out the gate and said, that house can also be sold separately.
Subdivided.
Not even. And then
Not even, because you're talking about maybe a co-op situation.
Yeah,
Where
so
it's sold separately, but you still have shared taxes, you have shared utilities, but you can actually sell that unit, create kind of a co-op or an LLC that governs it, that everybody has a piece of.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the state has already passed that bill, AB 1033, but the state did pull back and say, hey, it's up to the local municipalities if they want to adopt this. So I believe San Diego, in my personal opinion, will likely adopt this. And remember, San Diego has had this program of bonus ADUs where people have built tens and tens of ADUs on the property. So yes, exactly. You would create like a little HOA between you and that person, and then your HOA fees will cover because you have shared utilities and all this stuff. Your HOA fees will go to pay for all those things. And then of course they sub-meter everything. So, you sub-meter the water, the electrical, you do a sub-panel. So you can see like what the actual unit is using when you get your electrical bill, when you get your water bill. You can see like, oh, okay, this meter is using this and that.
Meter, but you have to calculate it yourselves. So the utility company isn't doing that.
Correct.
Super interesting. So to kind of go back and recap, for the most part, ADUs, they're going to have shared services. They're going to have shared electricity. They're going to have shared sewer, water, and gas, if you have gas.
Correct.
A lot of them are just electric,
Sure.
right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're building a new structure, you've got to have solar on new structures now in
Correct.
California. There's a minimum amount of coverage that they require. That's why when you're seeing brand new homes being built today, you'll see solar panels, but not very many of them because they're doing the minimum. And so you've got to figure out a way to manage those shared utilities. It might be by head count, and you divide it up that way. In our case, the way that we're currently doing it is we kind of have looked at the previous utility bills for electricity in the unit, what size it is, how much it's been, and then we charge a flat fee for that, and we give a credit to the main house who pays for the utilities. So there's a few different ways that you can do that. You also really have to pay attention from a cost standpoint on the electrical service. Like upgrading a panel and bringing in more electricity could be very expensive. We happen to be okay on this one. I don't know on the next one yet if we are, but the water was a big deal. They wanted additional service, which reminds me, I want to talk to you about that because I don't think they've done the upgrade to mine yet, and I'm wondering when that happens because we're getting close to completion. Maybe they did it. I don't know. We have to check with the contractor.
Yeah.
But that said, that's a really important thing to keep in mind. And again, these are things that if you hire separate, if you want to hire out separate people to do the architecture, do the permitting, et cetera, there's no cohesiveness and they're not taking all this into consideration. And you can wind up finding yourself in a position where you're paying 20, 30% more than you needed to if you would have just tweaked it out a little smaller square footage, or designed it a little differently. So it's super important. How long can somebody expect it to take from start when they go, France, let's do the feasibility study, all the way to the completion? And I know there's some variables based on the city and that sort of thing, but you have a general idea. How long can it take somebody from start to finish?
I'd say if you're considering joining the AmeriFund team, it's a really good idea.
We as processors at AmeriFund Home Loans support the loan officers in every aspect of the loan once it comes into processing because we want them out there marketing themselves and originating more loans and supporting more borrowers.
Competitive commission plans are a given, and powerful technology is expected, but what truly sets us apart is our culture. We've built a solid support system for our loan officers. If you're interested in joining the AmeriFund team, go to amerifund.com/careers.
To get approvals.
To get approvals and to actually complete the project, have it turnkey, ready to go.
Yeah, so we try to keep all our projects like maximum like 6 months, even if it's like the busiest, local municipality ever. We know our ADU laws in terms of how long they can hang on to a permit for before that permit is actually deemed approved by the HCD. So I've utilized that tactic on a couple of permits. You have your other municipalities where like no one's putting building permits through. So you can use that to your advantage, to obviously get the permit like pushed faster, but even then it can hang around their desk. So another tactic we use is like a lot of places will have a over-the-counter permitting. Mm-hmm. So, okay, just print out your plans, print out the, structural calculations, everything, and go to the counter, do the review right there, schedule an appointment, do the review right there, etc. So in most of our cases, everything's like within 6 months. And that's like a really, really good timeline for us to do. We're doing your feasibility up front. We're determining what the scope is going to be. And, we're trying to educate the client throughout the entire process. And then the design, the engineering, the permit coordination, and then, final approval. You run into a little hiccups here and there. Sometimes you have to argue with the, utility companies, et cetera, because we need their sign-offs. So 6 months or under, we're like 99% confident we will achieve that for you.
Okay, that's fair. So from the time somebody decides they want to do an ADU, they engage with you, they do the feasibility study to begin with, all the way through to approved permits ready to start. 6 months is generally as long as it takes.
Yes.
Perfect. And then just, from my experience, from your experience, from the time you begin the construction of the project to completion, it really depends on weather related and all these things. But I would say that's got to be at least another 6 to 7, maybe 8 months on the outside.
Yes.
So you're looking at, just over a year to put yourself in a position. Now that's for a complete detached. Like if you're doing an attached conversion, things of that nature, it's going to be a lot quicker. Give us an idea or tell us a story of your favorite ADU project. And, you can think about it, but what was your favorite ADU project and why?
I'm personally just a guy who just doesn't have favorites, so you're asking the wrong guy. But a few that stick out to me are all the projects I've had to go to the HCD and fight. Just because you hear so many people are so sure that you don't know what you're talking about. And this includes people in the industry and, some of our, even our competitors, like, they're like, yeah, this person, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And so, you always know because, you've done the work, but it's so validating. Like, when you actually, and I love that the HCD allows that there's a process for you to go and, literally you're taking on the city. Yeah. And the local municipality, and you argue your case, they argue their case, and then the HCD rules in someone's favor. So that's always those projects where we've had to involve the HCD. They're really validating for us because it helps let the city know, like, hey, you might want to humble yourself a little bit, do a little bit more research, and not be so quick to blow someone off who's literally explaining it to you just like they explain it to the HCD, like this is the law. You're in violation of the law itself. So I would say those are some of my favorite projects. And then honestly, probably like any conversion project right now, we're crushing in like 2-3 months. You're done. So those are also like my favorite projects because we get like, and they get like more and more like basically special privileges that regular, ADU projects don't really get. So we're able to streamline the process even faster because, you don't even technically need engineering for an existing structure because it's an existing structure. Yeah. So then you can save a lot of money for the client with it, like, hey, you're not going to pay for engineering. We can skip that part altogether. So that's going to expedite the permit for you. It's going to save you money on your carrying costs for that particular property. And it's also going to speed up the permit because that's one less person reviewing that whole engineering section. You can throw that out the window. We're not paying an engineer, et cetera. So a lot of conversion projects, like those are really, really like my favorite. Like you just uploaded a testimonial about a project we did, which was a 2-part project. A full home remodel and a conversion ADU, and we completed the entire project in 6 weeks. And then the construction aspect goes through super quick, and I think it might have taken a month for the construction. Wow. Yeah.
Wow.
So
impressive.
Yeah, we have 2 other projects for that specific client now. So yeah.
Think of a situation where you were working with a client on doing an ADU, and the local municipality pushed back on you, and you had to tell them that's not the law, this is the law, and get them straightened out, and they still wouldn't listen to you. Sometimes the threat of that works, but they still wouldn't listen to you. You go to the HDC, and they had to come back in and do a ruling and basically turn that around. And just tell us a story about that, and maybe how that set the tone for the rest of that project.
Yeah, the first time actually I did that, it was a little nerve-wracking because prior to starting my own company, I worked for another company, and even the people at that company thought I was freaking crazy. Like, what are you talking about, man? The local legislators here, they interpreted the law, and this is the law. And I'm like, no, guys, like, you have to trust me. ADU law is interpreted wrong here, and then there's this whole avenue with the HCD that we can fight, et cetera. Nah, like, you're crazy. Like, go back and run your sales department, et cetera. And so then finally when I branched off on my own, I'm like, okay, it's time to, put my money where my mouth is. And
flex your muscles.
Yeah, and like, show everybody like, okay, like, is this a real thing? Can a single family home really have 2 ADUs? And I 100%, you can call the county of San Diego, the greater county, because remember, city of San Diego, you can have unlimited ADUs.
Yeah.
So that was never an issue. County of San Diego, that was our first project, me as independent company. Mm-hmm. And if you call the county of San Diego right now, they'll tell you who had the first 2 multiple
Hanna.
ADU. Yeah, they'll tell you ADU wonders, France Hanna.
Yeah.
And actually, like, I have a great relationship with those guys because I had the client. I told the client. Luckily, the client was on board. I said, hey, if we're gonna maximize this lot, let's not just do this 1,200 square foot ADU. Which, by the way, that's going to be our next meetup, which will be at the end of the month. It's going to be a fully completed project now. They're just wrapping up construction. I said, you also just have this garage just chilling over here in the back. Like, let's convert that too. Mm-hmm. Oh, I thought, we're only allowed 1. No, we're allowed 2. So this was, a little bit over a year ago. But here's what's going to happen. I'm going to submit the permit, and the permit is going to get denied, And then I have to escalate the issue within the actual municipality by going to a supervisor. And then I need a rejection from the supervisor before I go to the HCD.
Okay.
So they were well aware of the situation. I said, hey, I'm pretty confident I'm right. This is going to work. But also, like, there's a small chance it won't. Okay, listen, I trust you. If it doesn't work, it's okay, because the 1,200 square foot ADU is what's most important. So, sure enough, we did that. And I never take the, anything personal from the local municipalities. I know they have to learn a lot of stuff. So, and I always tell them, like, okay, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I know they cannot, if the HCD says something, like, you have to act on it, or you could face some very serious consequences. So I always say, like, hey, this is going to be a learning opportunity for both of us. The HCD is going to come in and they're going to rule, and they're going to, and the County of San Diego, the HCD makes a ruling. County of San Diego is one of those jurisdictions where you can do over-the-counter permitting. We use that to our advantage. It expedites that permit so quick. I think we got permits within 3 months for those 2 ADUs, even though County of San Diego is, like, super busy because it covers such a large area. And so the next day after the ruling, I went in with my plans that they rejected, and the supervisors came out. Oh, okay. He's like, yeah, so we had a meeting about you yesterday.
So you're Mr. Hanna.
Yeah, people always assume, like, I'm a female due to my name. It's like, oh, okay, like, we had a meeting about you yesterday. Yeah, we're going to approve your plans, and, you're right. And, yeah, we were, confused about this. And I have an amazing relationship with those guys, and they're super nice. And it was like, hey, it wasn't clear the way, like, the ADU code was written. And like, legal English is, like, kind of hard to interpret versus like regular English. And I'm like, because the code doesn't specifically say, like, I'm restricted to this. So, and the HCD helped.
That's pretty impressive, because look, a lot of these guys that are working at these cities, they're city employees, and they have big egos. And so for them to come back and go, hey, you were right, we all learned from this, and you now have that working relationship, that's great. And we've had our challenges as well. There's probably no project that just runs smoothly and goes through without any challenges. Last thing I want to ask you about is when you have a situation where maybe the city's trying to take advantage a little bit. Maybe they want you to do some upgrades that really are not required, whether it be a water upgrade or a sewer upgrade or electrical upgrade or something of this nature, where you look at it and you go, wait a minute, the calcs work. You shouldn't, under these guidelines with this size ADU, you shouldn't be required to do this, but yet they're wanting to slap this on you and make you pay for this upgrade that's a city benefit, not your benefit, and then you go to the HDC to fight it, but it slows down the project. There are times where you'd recommend just paying it to keep the project going and then going to the HDC to ask for a refund. How does that work?
Yeah, so there's been a few projects, one of them is like your project where they surprised us with, like, hey, you need to do this. And then in your project, the fee was so small. I'm like, hey, let's just pay it. We'll ask for the refund. And then other projects, actually, I have a project right now where between the time when we initially submitted and the city, the very next week, they actually almost tripled the fees. And this is actually City of San Diego, by the way. So it's like, we're fighting it still with the HCD. And I'm saying, like, well, one, hey, the fees, I know ADU fees, like, they have to be proportional to the size of the ADU. You can't just do a blanketed fee. And then another thing is, like, hey, we submitted our project. I don't care when they processed it. We submitted on this. I'm grandfathered to the old fees, if anything.
Yeah.
And the problem is when you involve the HCD tries not to only fix the problem for you. it tries to actually fix the problem for everybody.
Sure.
So no one else has to complain about the same thing over again. And in some cases that does, take a long time. So for this particular project, actually, like, my client, who I have also a close relationship with, like, messaged me like, hey, should we just pay the fee? And we're talking about $20,000.
Yeah.
Like, should we just pay the fee? Because honestly, like, the carrying costs are killing me. Like,
Yep.
I already, exhausted that. And so I told the HCD, like, hey, this is taking like such a long time. We already actually, like, the client already paid this fee and then some in carrying costs. Now, mind you, the client did tell me before that the main house was being rented out. But apparently it was just being rented out to their family members. So it wasn't really, it's one of those situations. So a lot of times that if it's something minor where it's like, hey, the local municipality is trying to charge me or force me to do like some offsite upgrades, which I know like ADUs are immune to, the HCD comes in really quick.
Yeah.
And just says no. Like, you're
Got
not
it.
going to do that. You're not going to do any offsite improvements like build a sidewalk or something.
Sure.
You don't need to do that.
Yeah.
And so when it's something a little bit more intricate and very specific to that particular project, those local, jurisdictions or, the utility companies, et cetera, it does create like this back and forth thing. Oh, well,
Yeah.
I thought he was telling me this. I thought, we're just saying this. We're just saying that. And, then the HCD like pulls up the building code, which local municipalities can take the building code and add on to it. And then it's like, well, did they do that? If they don't do that, and then it defaults to this.
So in some cases, like you said, you recommend just pay the fee, but then you can go to the HDC and say, hey, this was unfair. We paid this, and can you help us get a refund? Right? Is that essentially what it
Yes,
works out to be?
yeah.
And then they would come back and tell us what they would tell the city, you owe them a refund. Would they say how much? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, basically it's you just go through and then whoever it is, whether it's like the city or the local utility company, they'll basically go through and redo your intake form.
Okay.
In a sense, to say like, oh, technically this project actually didn't fit in with this particular fee. It actually fit in with this.
And so they'll recalculate it, and then they'll refund you the difference.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's so good to know. And you are fighting one of those fees for me right now,
Yep.
and that is another additional benefit of using your service. This has been incredibly informative. I'm going to finish with one thing because I know people will ask this. What could it cost to build an 800 square foot ADU from start to finish? And let me just tell you from experience that with the services that France provides, the design work, the permitting, all the costs of those permits, the construction all the way through to the very end. And this is decent materials, not super high end, definitely not low end. From start to completion, 800 square foot, figure it's going to be about $325,000. That gives you a really kind of good point. It could be more or less than that, but that gives you an idea. Now you got to figure out what kind of rent you can get on that if it makes sense. You tell me if you could buy an 800 square foot home for $300,000 or $325,000 in California today. That'll help you to make that decision. So, France, thanks, man. If somebody wanted to reach you, if they want to hire you for your services, how do they get a hold of you?
So you can go to our website, aduwonders.com. You can fill out a form there, tell us a little bit about your situation, and we'll get a hold of you and then start the consultation, the discovery call, the feasibility. And like I said, we try to educate every single client. So you can also give us a call. Phone number is 619-900-4499. Or, reach out to us on social media, Instagram or TikTok. ADU Wonders.
It's still around.
Yeah, ADU
But
Wonders.
I will tell you, France is super responsive. I would recommend go to the website, fill out the form, or call him. When you go to his socials, there's not a lot there. He hasn't spent a lot of time on it. But that's fine. He's changing that. And we're going to give him some good content. We're going to go out to the property that he helped us with today, which, by the way, we are documenting And pretty soon, as soon as it's done, so figure another month or two. So this will be, let's say, by the end of Q1 2025, we'll have a full documented from start to finish ADU build, and you can see how it works. So, hey, thanks again for joining us today on this episode of The Blueprint, where we talked about accessory dwelling units. If we brought you value, if you like what you saw, please like, share, subscribe, tell everybody about it, and we'll see you next time.